Now we had a look at our liver and how it processes our fuel supply. Now we're going to have a look at carbohydrates. Now carbohydrates is a first fuel, but it has a bad rap lately. It has a bad reputation. All right, so a lot of people think it's the fault of the carbohydrate and say, oh, well, we'll just cut out carbohydrates and I'll just go on a zero carb diet. I've put myself through a zero carb diet and I found it's not the most optimal way to diet. All right, now you need carbohydrates. Now, if there's something I'd like you to understand is the best way to diet is with the most amount of calories and the most amount of carbohydrates possible. All right, when my coach told me that, it blew my mind. I didn't get it. And then I tried to understand. Okay, my body needs that fuel. All right, so it's the problem is not that carbohydrates is bad, it's the management of the person that's supplying themselves with carbohydrate that gets mismanaged. We're going to have a look at supply and demand today. So, carbohydrates. We eat our carbohydrates, we eat our fats, we eat our proteins. Okay, now it's going to break down in our stomach and eventually end up in our liver. Now we also have our stored fat too, okay? Now it's going to break down into the bloodstream and eventually get to the liver. Now say that your liver processes that fuel supply, all right, but exactly how does that do that? So what your liver does, if it thinks that it needs fuel, it can break down all these elements and it can turn it into a carbohydrate. All right, so it breaks it all down, it sorts it all out, and if it thinks it needs fuel, out the other end is going to come glycogen. All right, glycogen or glucose. So no matter if you supply bread, you're going to get glucose. No matter if you supply barley or if you supply chocolate, you're going to get glucose. All right, so glucose is the most basic form of carbohydrate. Now I've got glucose then, I've got glycogen as well. You've got glucose, glycogen, glycogen, glucose. I'm going to say the same thing, and I'm just going to actually say that it's the same thing. Basically, glycogen is when it's stored, glucose is when it's in the bloodstream. Okay? So we've got sugar, and when it enters our bloodstream, that's when it rises up our blood sugar. So you hear of people saying, okay, well, I've got a high blood sugar. That's because your liver has released glucose into it. So there's only one sugar that your body ends up using, and that's glucose, okay? Now we can use it, and it's going to get stored in our muscle storage. Now remember I said that before, that we've got our muscle storage, and that's what we use for fuel. That sugar gets stored in that muscle. We can use it for exercise, and that process there of fuel coming through and coming along is called glycogenesis. So glycogenesis. What's Genesis? That's the first book of the Bible, meaning the creation of. The creation of sugar. The creation of sugar. That's exactly what your liver does when it tries to supply your body, your muscles, for fuel. So 100% of your carbohydrates that you eat can get used for fuel. All right, 100% of it converts it very easy, and 100% of it you can use for fuel. Now your proteins, it's a very complex task, and when your liver wants to use it for fuel, a lot of that energy gets broken down into thermogenesis and nitrogen and whatnot, and you get about, say, 58% of it you can use as a carbohydrate, so a lot less. And then your fats, your dietary fats, like your nuts, your avocados, now your body can use 10% of that for fuel, all right? It's not a preferred fuel source, all right? Carbohydrates is the fuel that your body wants, not fats, okay? Not proteins. They're used for different things. Now, your stored fat, the good news here is that 100% of your stored fat that you got on your belly, within your organs, in your bloodstream. Now, all that you can use for fuel. All right. So we have glucose in the bloodstream. Yeah, it's flowing along. We've got a steady. We've got sugar in our blood. We've got a blood sugar rating, whether it's high or low. Now it has to go somewhere. All right. Your blood supply is that transit to get that fuel towards its destination, get that sugar toward its destination. Now I've created this cup-looking device, this beacon. All right, so to show you that your muscle can contain a certain amount of glycogen in there. All right, so your muscle can hold glycogen, and that's when it uses it for fuel. So when it breaks down, it turns into a process called ATP. When that breaks down, you don't need to know that, but when that breaks down, you can flex your muscles. Like I'm using glucose right now. All right. Now just say I'm sedentary. Now you're going to see this poor bloke a fair bit. Now he's just sitting down and he's eating, all right, like a lot of us do. We have very sedentary jobs and we sit there and we eat. All right, now when you're sedentary, you can fill up, your glucose is going to fill up quite quickly. All right, it's going to restore your glucose at a fast rate. So it's not going to take very long until this person that's sitting down and eating to restore until their glycogen levels are full. Now, your muscles are full, all right? You can't fit any more in there. So it's just like a cup, all right? But that glucose, it has to go somewhere. Now, if you can't fit any more glucose into that cup, that's something that we know as spillover, yeah? We've got glucose spillover. So it stays in the bloodstream, but it still has to go somewhere. So where it ends up going is to your fat storage. So the glucose either has to store into your muscles, and if you can't get any more there, then you spill over, we store it as fat. So the liver processes our fuel supply. No matter what we give ourselves, at the end is going to become glucose or glycogen. That process is called glycogenesis, and we can actually use it for fuel or store it for fat. Yeah?